for tuning in to this episode from ABD to PhD show. I'm your host, Dr. Ramon Goings, founder of Done Dissertation, where we demystify the dissertation process so that doctoral students can write and defend a dissertation in 1 year or less. This episode from ABD to PhD is all about mindset shifts. As you all know, when you're in the doctoral program, in order to go from ABD to PhD, something has to change. And for a lot of us, we think it's all about our writing, but there's a mindset shift that happens throughout the process. And for many of us, it's when we don't develop that mindset, it keeps us stuck. And for a lot of us that are stuck at ABD, sometimes it just takes this mindset shift. And in tonight's episode, we're going to talk all about how to change that mindset in order to prepare to finish your doctorate this year. And so I say thank you all so much for tuning in. This episode of the show is sponsored by our upcoming webinar on February 16th. And this webinar is particularly designed for doctoral students who are in need of support around mental health. And so what we have done is for this particular webinar, I've provided 3 mental health experts, folks who actually, do therapy with students like yourselves, to really talk about coping mechanisms and ways to, address the impact of mental health on the dissertation process. So if you're interested in joining us for this free webinar, it's just free information because we want to provide support for you all. Make sure that you visit www.dissertationwebinar.com to learn more about the event and join. And this is for students as well as faculty, because we're going to talk about some of the faculty issues as well. So feel free to share this out with, faculty, staff, and other doctoral students who need the support and want to talk to and get some strategy and advice from an actual mental health provider. And so with that, all things said, we want to talk today about our mindset. Mindset is such a critical component. And before we get into this, as always, for those who are tuning in live, let me know in the comments where you are tuning in from. I always want to build community with each other. And so I know folks might be in similar doctoral programs or just might, have an opportunity to connect with each other. So make sure that you all do that. And you all probably have overlapping research interests too. So just make sure that you connect with people in the comments. A shout out to Sarah, who's a Velocity client, for jumping on. It's good to see you. And before we get started as well, congratulations to Vincent Battles, one of our clients who successfully defended his dissertation last week. And I'm so excited for his research on Black male dentists. So be on the lookout. We might be sending a recruitment flyer. So if any Black male dentists that, are on this page or one, give them a heads up that we have a student who is going to be researching the experiences of Black male dentists. So I definitely will be on the lookout for something from us around that. And so now let's get into the material, because I want to talk all about the mindset shifts that we're going to have to make in order to go from ABD to PhD. And so the first mindset shift is going to deal with writing, because I know a lot of you all, come to, watch the show because you want strategy, right? You want strategy on your dissertation. And for a lot of folks, when you think of strategy, we often think about writing. So I want to start out by giving you some writing mindset shift that you're going to have to make in order to go from ABD to PhD. And the mindset shift is that writing is actually a multi-phase process. And so don't try to get a finished product on the first try. And here's why this is really a mindset shift that you're going to have to make around writing. Because it's like a lot of doctors, we come into this thing thinking like, oh man, my writing's got to be perfect. I read those journal articles and like that writing is flawless and all these things. But little do you know that there's like a multi-phase step, even when you read those journal articles, because I just know from publishing a lot myself, I might initially submit the article for review, after 6 months to a year after review, I get edits back. And then sometimes it's like copy edits. Sometimes it's grammar, syntax, sometimes. And then other times it's like, hey, can you expand on this argument? Can you do this differently? So by the time you all read it, we've gone through that first round of review. Then a lot of times when we resubmit the article back to the journal, there's a second round of review. And then those same reviewers may say, hey, you did a great job, or you didn't do a great job. That's the second round of review. And then at that point, let's say you do well on that second round and it gets to the editor, and the chief editor of the journal says, you know what, that's accepted for publication. And you're congratulating yourself. But as a writer, we all know if you've been publishing, after that happens, now it goes to a copy editor. And they're responsible for formatting to the journal's requirements, but then also they're going to clean it up the document as well. They're going to tell you, hey, you got some references that don't match in the text to the reference list. Go ahead and make those suggestions. So there's so much that happens. So by the time that you see the article, it's fully polished. And for a lot of us as doc students, we may think our writing has to be so polished like that, but literally they've gone through 4 to 5 iterations of that one journal article that got to you in its quote perfect format. So as a writer with your dissertation, just recognize that writing is a multi-phase process. So don't get, consumed with trying to get a finished product on the first try. And then, over the past weekend, we had the Grammy Awards. And so a lot of you all, have been seeing everybody going to uproar about these Beyonce tickets. Even in our class, folks are talking. I got a couple Beyonce fans in my class. And they're talking about the tickets and how they're going to, go to this show. And then at the Grammy Awards, Beyonce getting, becoming one of the top Grammy earners, right? But if you go on YouTube, Beyonce in the recording studio, there's a video I saw. I remember watching it. It was her recording. I forget. It's the song with Sean Paul. I forget the name of the song. I think it was Dangerously in Love. I can't remember the name. It's slipping me right now. Naughty Girl. I'm sorry. There it goes. It was called Naughty Girl. And you could watch her on YouTube. You can find a clip of her singing the same line over and over and over again. And my question to you is, if Beyonce is willing to sing this one line from Naughty Girl over and over again, are you willing to do the same amount of revisions to get your dissertation done? And Beyonce would be considered one of our greatest artists, right? And so if they're willing to put in that type of work, why wouldn't you be able to do the same? They recognize that the recording process in terms of music is a multi-phase process. So is writing. And so I want you all to really start thinking about that and recognize that your favorite artist, they're doing multiple takes to get the polished product. The dissertation that you read, they've had multiple eyes on them. Maybe they had an editor even read them. So there's so much that happens before you see a final product. So I don't want you to get caught up in believing your writing has to be, polished on the first try. Your goal, as I will say over and over again, is to have the sloppiest rough draft as quickly as possible. That's the goal, because once it's on paper, now we can work with it. We can edit, we can do some things, we can turn it around. It becomes so much easier. But if you're not willing to engage in that part of the process, it's going to be very difficult. And then with that, when we think about this mindset shift around writing, you also got to recognize, and I'll tell you two modes of writing that I often tell our clients, and I'm a firm believer of, that there is a creation mode to writing and there's a production mode to writing. And so when you're in the creator mode, you just have to create. So that means you need to just sit down and write and get it out as ugly as possible. A lot of us, what we end up doing is that we try to edit while we are in creation mode. And that's the wrong thing to do, because once you create the product and it's on paper, now you can transition into production mode, where you actually are able to take that writing, massage it, edit it, move things around, maybe add some more pieces in. That will allow you to get the final polished product. And that's what you see in a lot of the writings that you all have. There's two modes to it, but you often only get the final product. You don't see the work that went into it just to get that iteration of the document. And trust me, with a dissertation, I'm going to let y'all know right now, documents are so long, there's always going to be an error. I still look at mine. Mine's 221 pages from the first page to the last page, and there's some errors in there. You just can't catch them all. It's just impossible. So again, the writing is a multiple phase process, and just know that it will never be perfect. And it's okay. It will be done though when you have your doctorate. Nobody cares at that point, was it perfect or not? It's just done. So again, that was the first mindset shift around writing. That this idea that writing is a multi-phase process. So don't try to get a finished product on the first try. And for those of you just tuning in, on this episode, we're going to talk about 5 mindset shifts to go from ABD to PhD. And this particular episode is sponsored by our Done Dissertation, the impact on mental health on the dissertation process webinar we have coming up on February the 16th. To learn more about the webinar and to sign up, you can go to www.dissertationwebinar.com to learn more about the panel, because what we want to do is bring together mental health experts who can give strategies on how to cope with the stress and anxiety of actually writing a dissertation, because we have learned as much more than just writing. Thanks, Dr. Bianco, for tuning in and talking about an important topic. Yeah, thank you so much. I appreciate you. Yeah, we just see it over and over again in terms of mental health, and it's really important. And this actually ties in well to my next mindset shift that I think as doctoral students we have to make, is the idea that the dissertation is more than just writing. And that's a mindset shift, because a lot of folks think about the dissertation process like, oh, I just got to write the dissertation. But honestly, the dissertation is more thinking than it is writing. And I had to come to that realization, and it took me a while to kind of figure that out, because it just didn't quite make sense at first. And I remember I had a professor, shout out to Dr. Shockley, who's at the University of Houston now, but he was my professor when I was a doctor student at Morgan State. And he kept telling us in this philosophy class, he was like, look, I need you all to start thinking research. And the more that you start thinking like a researcher and getting clearer on your thoughts, the better your writing will become. He's like, and I actually want you to spend more time thinking about the writing than actually doing the writing itself. And I didn't get that when I was a student. I was like, yeah, yeah, whatever. Like, I'm trying to write this thing so I can get out of this program. Like many of you all probably think the same way. But now, kind of being on the other side and having thought through that, I see where he was going. And now I kind of have taken that approach where I think about the writing, and some people will call this like conceptualizing your research. So I do a lot of conceptualizing, mentally. And then because I get the conceptualization process clear, then when I go to sit down and write, my thoughts are very clear. And I would often say that writing is a result of clear thinking. And so if you haven't done the process, the part to think through your writing, the dissertation will become very difficult because you'll just be approaching it as a writing exercise when it's definitely not that. It's a mental exercise. And who you are coming into the dissertation should be very different than who it is that leaves the process. Because if you've done it the right way in terms of really learning, you come out a different person. You just can't help it. The process is geared to do that to you because you are generating new knowledge that did not exist in the way you're presenting it before you actually started doing your research study. And so, and just to take another example, recently a couple of clients have defended, right? And so I went to one of our clients' defenses last week, and at the defense, I think the student, but for me, I was happy to see it. But I know for a lot of students, they think the dissertation defense is such a grueling process, which it can be. But in this student's defense, it became more of a conversation. It became a conversation because the committee wanted to see how is the student thinking about the research. It stopped being about the writing. It started to be about how are you conceptualizing this work and how do you tie it all together. And remember, researching is a thinking process first and then an action process second. The first part, you got to think through these things. So if you're not doing the thinking part, which sometimes students, you may not be doing the thinking part because you want to go ahead and sit down and write so fast. But if you just had stopped and thought about, what am I going to do for this study and really conceptualize it, the writing becomes a lot easier on the back end. But again, that's a process that sometimes because we're up against these timelines and deadlines, we don't always want to do, but it's something that is really important to finish in. So again, that second mindset shift is that, your dissertation is more of a mental process than a writing process. And the sooner you figure that out, the easier the dissertation will become to get done. And again, thank you all for tuning in so far for this episode of From ABD to PhD show. Today, we're talking about 5 mindset shifts to go from ABD to PhD. And this particular episode is sponsored by our upcoming panel, all focused on the impact of mental health on the dissertation process. So if you're interested in joining us for this free panel where we have 3 mental health experts who are going to share strategies and insights on how to cope and get through the dissertation process, please visit www.dissertationwebinar.com. It is on February the 16th from 8 to 9 p.m. Eastern time. So make sure that you tune in and chat and get help with us. And then there's an opportunity when you do join to submit questions. So we want to make this questions that the audience actually wants to hear about. And so if you have questions, please submit them so that we know, that we can be responsive to your needs for this particular panel. And so when we get into our next mindset shift, the third mindset shift in order to go from ABD to PhD is that you have to stop comparing yourself to your classmates and what you see on social media. Here's why. Everyone has a very unique journey, and you have to just be comfortable in that you're going to be, in your own process. A lot of us want to, experience what our classmates are experiencing at the same exact time so bad that we spend so much time looking at them and what they're doing, we lose sight of what we're doing. And I'm just thinking about when we were teaching our 4-year-old, she was on her tricycle, riding her bike. And we like, Leah, just ride straight. She'd see something, and then next thing she's thinking she's riding straight, but then she's grabbing the handlebars and then curving over and about to run into the curb, not paying attention. And that's what a lot of students sometimes you start to do when you're so focused on everybody else. So you should be going straight, but you're trying to look over here, and because of that, you just veered off. And then what that looks like is that you've been out of your doctoral program for a year, you haven't done any writing. You're getting so discouraged because now you're like, shoot, my cohort mates are finishing. I'm not even part of that cohort anymore. You start having these thoughts, but it's only because you're so focused on what they're doing than focusing on your own journey. And even in my own experience, right, I wrote my dissertation in 7 months. 7 months from start to finish of the writing process. I end up waiting another 6 months to defend because of just waiting for faculty to come back from the semester break. But I finished in 7 months. So for a lot of folks, they'll be like, oh man, you're unique. You finished so quickly. How can I have that? Or why can't I do that? But the real thing you got to consider is that when folks see the end result of what I was able to do, They don't recognize 2 years prior. So I defended in October 21st, 2015, but they don't recognize around 2012, 2013. I was heavy in the books trying to figure out how the heck am I going to learn how to be an academic writer? But nobody saw that part of the process. Nobody saw on every Sunday I would be spending about 10 hours sitting down at a desk. A lot of times be on our couch. Renee and I'd be sitting around, she'd be watching TV. I'd be trying to watch football or whatever, doing my work. Nobody saw that part. Nobody saw the part where my second year in the doc program, I read one journal article every year. And I kept a lot of notes about vocabulary, looking at vocabulary words, trying to improve, like teaching myself how to write. Nobody saw that. All they saw was the end result. So for someone else, when you're focusing on someone else's journey with the dissertation, you might not see all that pre-work that happened as to why they finished so fast. And so again, that was my own experience. Like I was able to write quickly because I had done so much pre-work leading up to the dissertation. I was well versed in my literature. I had started to kind of think through and write for publication by that point. I started doing some things that really helped propel me to finish a lot faster. But again, you don't see all that. And so I always will say, if you're trying to make this mindset shift to go from ABD to PhD, you have to recognize that you can't compare yourself to your classmates. Your journey is yours alone, and your journey is yours that you're going to have to walk alone. You have your support team, but it's your journey that you have to experience. Because again, the dissertation process is mental. It's more mental than writing. And so as a result, we got to be just mentally focused on our unique journey. Everybody's process is going to look different. Not everybody has the best chair. Like I'm just thinking about our office hour call. We have some students, clients who have great chairs. We have some who have chairs that really shouldn't be chairs, and everything in between. And so, but what they recognize that the mental process, they just have to stay focused on the things that they can control, which is how they write and the quality of product that they present. So these are the things that are really important and impactful in order to finish. As I'm going through this, we have two more mindset shifts left. But if you have any questions, please let me know in the comments, and I'd be happy to discuss those with you all. But again, this third mindset shift to go from ABD to PhD is that you have to stop comparing yourself to your classmates and what you see on social media. So if you all are, you might watch this show, but then after you might, you see your classmates on social media, like with the regalia. I just saw a post before I got on here. Somebody had the regalia, like I guess it just came in the mail. I don't think they've defended yet, but they had it up and they, had it on the wall and took a picture of it, like, doctor loading, all that type of stuff. If those messages mess with you and like you get disgruntled and like, and you're upset that you haven't finished, sometimes you might have to cut social media off if that's something that really distracts you from your journey. But these are things that I see, and I see a lot of students get caught up in those things. And it's okay to be happy for those people, but don't take that personally about a reflection of yourself. It's really important because I know that will really stop people from finishing the process, is because you start to get in your own way. And for those who are just tuning in, this episode of From ABD to PhD show is talking about the 5 mindset shifts to go from ABD to PhD. And this episode is sponsored by our upcoming webinar on the impact of mental health on the dissertation process. We want to bring a panel together of mental health experts in order to help provide you actionable strategies on how to cope with and deal with, writing anxiety, stress, everything that can impact you mental health wise as you're finishing your dissertation. So if you're interested in learning more about the event, please go to www.dissertationwebinar.com to register. It's completely free. You don't have to pay for anything. We just want to provide this support for you. We have 3 great folks that are going to be chatting with you all about mental health and how to support yourself as you go through this journey. And with that, I want to talk about the 4th mindset shift that's going to help you to go from ABD to PhD. Is that you have to quickly recognize that the dissertation process won't always fit into your neat timeline. Again, I'll say that one again because some of y'all are very detail oriented, which is cool, but just recognize that the dissertation process will not always fit into your neat timeline. Honestly, most times it won't fit into your timeline. Just to be quite frank of what I've seen happen. But what I've seen from our clients in the Velocity Group Coaching Program is that they often will come into the program and maybe have a particular timeline. And, just depending on what's happening in their life and their journey, they may have to, really, switch things up and think about it differently based on what's happening in their process. So you have to be willing and open and flexible to really think through that, because it can really distract you if you are so adamant about it being on a particular timeline. But there are going to be delays, y'all. Just know that your chair won't give you back something on time. IRB is going to take forever. We just had a client who recognized and had to kind of shift their study that while they went through their university's IRB and found that there was going to be no problem, the other institution where they're going to collect their data from said that IRB from their institution is going to take 6 months. 6 months. No way that student could afford to do that. And I wouldn't recommend it either. So, but they had to shift their particular project in order to kind of satisfy and get some support around finishing, because now that changed the kind of scope of their project. And so again, these are things that you all got to consider and think about as you are progressing through. But it all starts with, one, it's important to have a timeline in terms of what you think needs to happen when, but just recognize you have to be willing to be flexible with it. Life happens. We have students that have had some traumatic events happen, and those students who still have defended successfully and finished, but just life has gotten in the way. Taking care of relatives, traveling back and forth to take care of relatives, long distance. Have some folks who experience job loss. I have some folks experience, loss of a loved one. All these things have happened while they're writing. And so that impacted their timeline. But because they knew, one, that they had a plan in place, that they were willing to make their timeline a little more flexible and didn't get as discouraged. And then sometimes you come to a realization in this process. It's like, look, I'm going to finish. And this is my thought for you all. You're going to finish. It's just a matter of when. And as long as you put the work in and the effort, you will finish, and you will finish quicker than what you think you will. This is something I know from coaching so many doctoral students through this process, is that you can definitely finish faster than you expect. And all it does, and all you need to do is keep your blinders on and just recognize, like, hey, I have a timeline. I'm going to work to meet my deadlines. But if I don't meet them, no sweat. I'm going to keep pushing forward anyway. The people who stay ABD, what they will do is, they will experience a roadblock, and they will say, you know what, it messed up my timeline. Forget this. I'm going to go back to being a great employee, and I'm going to go get a promotion at work, making more money, but having less time to devote to the dissertation. The next thing they look up, and a year and a half has gone by and they haven't finished. That's what I do know from watching folks, if they don't make this particular mindset shift. So again, for those who are just tuning in, we are talking about the 5 mindset shifts to go from ABD to PhD. I want to say thank you all so much for tuning in. This episode is sponsored by our upcoming dissertation webinar, where we're going to talk about the impact of mental health on the dissertation process. To learn more about this particular webinar and to sign up, it's completely free. Go to www.dissertationwebinar.com. Again, it's www.dissertationwebinar.com. And as we wrap up, I want to talk about the last mindset shift that will help you go from ABD to PhD. And that's the realization that seeking help is not a sign of weakness, but of strength. And again, that mindset shift you're going to make is that seeking help is not a sign of weakness, but a sign of strength. And here's what I do know about doc students. A lot of you all have gotten to this point where you're ABD, trying to finish up your dissertation. You have been great students. You have found a way to do things and overcome a lot of odds, myself included in that. Life odds, academic odds, all the things have been stacked up against you in some form or fashion, and you figured out a way to overcome them. But it's something about this dissertation process. Like, I just got a message, someone DM'd me today and was just disgruntled about the dissertation process had really like tore them down. And with that, because it tears you down so much, a lot of times we will cave in and not get help. And what I want you all to know, and I hope this will relieve a lot of you all, when you earn your doctorate, no one's going to turn around and ask you, hey, and I'm just looking at my names right here. I see Tanisha just joined. No one say, hey, Tanisha, I know you got your doctorate, but you got help to do it. Nobody cares. They're not going to ask you. They're not going to say, Tanisha, did you get help? Nobody cares. All they're going to want is, hey, did you get your doctorate? Can I give you X job based on the degree being a requirement? Do you have this doctoral degree? That's all they care about. Can we see the transcript so that we can just rubber stamp that you have finished? These are things that you have to consider, but a lot of us get so frustrated and we go internal with this thing. I've seen it over and over with our clients. And what ends up happening is that for many of you all, and sorry, y'all, real quick on Instagram. Okay, there we go. We're back on. And so for many of you all, what ends up happening is that you all don't want to finish, or you get so discouraged when things don't go according to plan. But it's like, why would you suffer? And then in a doctoral program, you're going to suffer. Then you're going to spend thousands of dollars in tuition, and you're gonna have nothing to show for it. It makes absolutely no sense. And Tanisha on Instagram says they don't even ask about the transcripts. That's a fact. They don't. A lot of times when you get your doctorate, depending on what type of position you got, they're like, you're good. Like, we ain't worried about it. Some people got caught up like that when they don't have their doctorate, and then some people catch them later on. I saw a wild story about this guy being a professor for like 20 years, and then they figured out that he didn't have a doctorate, but he was already been a professor for 20 years. Like, what are you supposed to do? But again, I want you all to really think about that. Seeking help is not a sign of weakness. And my thing is, like, you're going to be spending so much money in tuition, and this is an investment. You already invested in yourself. Why not get the help to finish? I always tell folks, and work with us is a mid 4-figure investment, right? And so it's like, I always tell people the ROI. Like me, you spending $6,000 to work with us at Done Dissertation in our Velocity Group coaching program will save you $19,000 in tuition. Why would you not do it? That's a three times your investment. So you put in 6 and you save 19,000. Why would you not do that? That's an investment. If you give that to me and I know I can get that type of return, give me that type of investment all day, every day. I'll take it. But again, what has to happen is that you have to recognize that you need help. One, that your way of trying to solve the problem has not worked for you. And that 3, that you recognize that there is another way to do it. One of the ways is in our Velocity Group coaching program. We always recommend it because we know that this thing works to help students get through. And particularly, it helps students get a framework and a model in order to get through and experience the success of the dissertation process. We're all about teaching you how to navigate the process. And this is really important in what we do in our Velocity Group coaching program. So if I have anybody who's a doc student on, or someone, that maybe that hasn't gotten their doctorate yet, but you're in the program with them, they still haven't finished, send them to www.velocitydissertation.com so that they can learn more about our program and to apply to work with us, because we want to help doctoral students get through the process. My goal is to help at least 1,000 doctoral students to get through. Right now, we're coming up close to like 200 or so, 200. So I want to get, to the 1,000 mark and then beyond that, of course. But I definitely need y'all's help in, getting the word out to other folks who may need support, and just helping them recognize that getting help is not a sign of weakness, it's a sign of strength. If you think about your favorite athlete, they have trainers. Like if you look at LeBron James, who's about to become the all-time leading scorer in NBA history, I think they say he spends $1 million a year on his team in terms of helping him health-wise. That's an investment, but he knows that investment each year is going to yield him multiple returns because he's been able to stay in the NBA so long. He's made so much in salary, endorsements, all these things have added up. So that $1 million is a drop in the bucket in himself in the future. And that's the same thing you all start thinking about when you're going to seek help. It's a drop in the bucket for your future potential. But what ends up happening, a lot of us think about is like, shoot, I got to spend this money. I already done spent money on tuition. I don't want to have to get help and spend more money. But look, you can stay with that mindset, and that mindset will keep you ABD. Or you can change that mindset like, look, a sign of strength in the leader is to recognize that I need help. In this particular area, I need help in, so get the help. And this is even for somebody, I'm talking about myself, right? So I'll give you all an example that's real world. So when I got my doctorate, as a part of my coursework, I took quantitative research classes. But honestly, when I was a student, I just didn't have the time to really sit down and learn quantitative research like I wanted to when I was a student. So what I did was when I became faculty member, I went to the National Science Foundation and I got a grant that actually allowed, part of the grant was to conduct a research project using mixed methods research. And then the other part of the grant was a researcher development award. And so that allowed me to invest in my own education. And I went back to classes. I took a doctoral level statistics class with first year doc students. And I'm someone at that point in time, and that was in 2019. I was 4 years into my faculty life. I had already published around that time, probably about 30 or 40 publications. Like I was in my bag already as a faculty member. Like I knew what I was doing. I was well, cited, all those things. But I knew I had a weakness that I wanted to, be able to help more of our clients at Done Dissertation. But I wanted to do different types of research. And without the skill set, my capability was limited. And so I just found a grant. I was able to do the work, to do the research project, invest in myself. And it's yielded so many dividends on that work because now I can do quantitative research. I actually help others do quantitative research. And then also, I got a grant out the deal. So I got my grantsmanship thing going. I got publications from the grant. Like all these things have added up. And so, but it took me having a different mindset to recognize like, hey, I got a doctorate, but I still don't have the skill set. So why not invest in myself to get the help? And this is what I leave you all with, because I think I want a lot of you all to consider, that in order to go from ABD to PhD, that mindset shift has to change around getting help. A lot of us spend too much time and waste too much money in tuition because of pride. And one thing I do know, pride will keep you ABD. And so the quicker that you let go of that pride and you get help, whether it's with us or someone else, it's cool. Either way, I just want y'all to get help. We definitely root for, and if you're part of our text message community, you know this, like when we send out our weekly affirmations, these are the folks who are not necessarily our clients. But when they get the affirmations, they tell us, hey, this really helped me. I'm about to defend my dissertation. We applaud them all the time that they've been able to do it themselves or with help from somebody else. Like, we just want people to finish. But we know our process is the truth, and we know that this thing works. So if you really want someone hands-on with you, then I recommend that you go to velocitydissertation.com and apply to work with us and get the support that you need to finish now. A lot of us spend too much time just wasted, and I definitely don't want to see that. I want you all to get these doctorates done. And so if there are any questions, those are the 5 mindset shifts that I had for you all this evening. I want to say thank you all so much for this particular episode. Next week's going to be a great episode. We're going to have a special guest, and we're going to talk about all things about AI and its impact on the dissertation process. I know y'all seeing a whole bunch of stuff coming out now about ChatGPT and all those sorts of things. So definitely tune in next week. We have Dr. Cecilia Parther, we're going to talk with her. She's an academic integrity expert. And we're going to talk about all things academic integrity and talk about AI and ChatGPT specifically, because we definitely have some great insights for you all. And lastly, before we jump off, make sure, if you haven't yet, make sure you come to our webinar that's focused on the impact of the mental health on the dissertation process. It's happening on February the 16th. You can visit www.dissertationwebinar.com to grab your registration for the event. It's completely free. Just put in your information and you'll get access to the event. And again, I want to say thank you all so much for tuning in. I'll take any questions before we jump off. But if no questions, I'll go ahead and log off for the evening. Thank you all so much. Thanks, Tanisha. It's good to see you. And teacher, I know we got to get together and talk about interviewing for office hours, I believe. So we make sure we do that. A shout out to the team, Done Dissertation, Carrie, Renee. And shout out to Dr. Varela too on her book. We're gonna have Dr. Varela come on and talk about her academic writing book as well. But any questions? All right. Well, I don't see anything. Well, what y'all can do for me, which will be very helpful, is either if you're on Instagram in your stories or something, tag us. Let us know what you took away from today's presentation, what's been helpful. If you're on LinkedIn, YouTube, Facebook, please just hit the share button and share this video with your feed, because it's just really helpful to get in front of more doctoral students to provide more support. So what you can do for us would be so much helpful is to share this. And if you're on YouTube, make sure you subscribe to our YouTube channel at Done Dissertation. And then if you're going to hit us on the audio experience later, make sure that you give us 5 stars. And please, please, please let us know what you took away from this episode. So with that, I look forward to talking with you all soon. I hope you all have a great, great week, and happy Valentine's Day. And I will see you all next Thursday at the dissertation webinar, all focused on the impact of mental health on the dissertation process. Talk to y'all soon. Peace.